Hello! Today being for H, it's for house hunting. Myself and my wife have been looking for a property now since, November last year, with a small break at Christmas time. And we're really looking in a couple of particular areas, and we'd even found the property until the owner, 5 weeks after agreeing the offer, decided to demand more money. And then when we refused, took it off the market, put it back on the market 2 weeks later, still didn't sell, and then took it off the market again. So we're still looking. That sort of practice would be illegal in Scotland, but it isn't in England. I searched around and I found a number of other stories that people had experienced from their various house moves. One lady had agreed to rent a flat at a great price, on the condition that she cleared out the belongings of the previous tenant, a very elderly gent who was a friend of the owner and had passed away in hospital a few months before. The lady didn't mind at all because it was mostly small furniture and books, plus a pantry full of paper bags and cooking pots. Not a problem. Moving in day came and she was going about her task with gusto, so much that she'd worked up quite a sweat. Handily, in the pantry, the old gent had stored several string bags full of lovely soft white cloths cut into small sizes, which she used to mop her perspiring brow. All was well until she stopped for a cuppa and wondered just where these wonderful lint-free, snugly soft cloths had come from. She dug a little deeper into one of the bags and saw something which made her stop in her tracks. That all too familiar stitching that makes up the Y on the Y front of a pair of gents' underpants. She had been wiping her face all day with an old man's pants. Still, nice flat. Another lady said that she hadn't been in her house so very long and didn't know the neighbours well, when a removal van pulled up outside of a house that had been on the market for ages. The two men were very pleasant and hard-working, and one of them even broke off to help me with my shopping bags, she said. And as the owners weren't there, she returned their kindness by giving them tea and bickies. Eventually they left. Then, 2 days later, the neighbours returned from holiday to find their house was completely empty. Red-faced, the lady gave a description of the two men to the police, but unfortunately the men who did the removals were never caught and the neighbours never spoke to her again. A chap had the story that went as follows. When I was a kid, my family and I moved house. We had to move in with my great-uncle for a couple of weeks until our new house was available. This was one big mistake. My uncle had lived alone for some years in a large old Victorian house. The house hadn't changed for years and all of his things were from the 1960s or even older and had never really been used. The first thing to happen was my mother wanted to turn up the heating, and this caused one of the radiators to leak, which in turn soaked through the floor and through to the room below. The first we knew of this was when puddles started appearing on the rather expensive parquet flooring. It had run down the velvet curtains, ultimately causing them to shrink. My mum then proceeded to do some washing in the rather antiquated washing machine. Unfortunately, the seal had perished on the washing machine and the machine leaked, flooding the kitchen. A couple of days later, the toilets all got blocked due to the increased usage, so my dad had to spend the next few days down the sewers removing the waste. My uncle attempted to use a metal rod at one stage and managed to smash the toilet, which had to be replaced. Being an antique toilet, it wasn't a cheap replacement. Another lady told the tale of the time that when their furniture left Germany, heading to Dundee with the removal company, everything went smooth. Until the furniture van arrived a week later, all excited to get off and into their new home. Everything unloaded, they started unpacking and placing it into the relevant rooms. When her husband asked, "Where's the toolbox?" they looked high and low and couldn't find the toolbox that contained every screw and Allen key to their flat-packed furniture. They got onto the removal company and explained what happened, and lo and behold, it had been left on the van, as the delivery driver had thought it was theirs. A week later, a huge truck appeared in the street carrying their toolbox, and at last they could finally assemble some furniture, including their bed, and sleep properly. One lady estate agent remembered the tale of showing a gentleman around her house. He wanted to see everything and asked to go down to the cellar. So she opened the door, and he went down thinking there were steps, but in fact there was a sheer drop into the cellar. Fortunately, he dropped into an old bath filled with foam, so he wasn't too much hurt. Only his pride and her job. My final tale for today comes from a lady who tells her tale as follows. My parents had recently put their house on the market and were going through a busy time of receiving lots of viewers. One Saturday afternoon was particularly busy as several sets of viewers were booked. My father was a chain smoker, and although my parents did their best to air the house thoroughly and disguise any odours before the arrival of viewers, a slight smell of smoke would often remain. It so happened that one of the viewers that afternoon was a lady who had recently had an operation on her throat, which had rendered her extremely sensitive to particular odours. Midway through the viewing, she became increasingly aggravated by the smell of smoke, which was starting to cause her some distress. Clearly, her discomfort became intolerable, as deciding that she could take no more, she fled from the house and hurried to her car. Unfortunately, the next viewer had decided to turn up a little earlier than arranged and was accompanied by her father, who also happened to be a vicar. As they approached the gate, they were met by the sight of a lady exiting the house in a terrible hurry, clutching her throat and gesticulating wildly. With my father standing at the front door looking both bemused and ever so slightly guilty, needless to say, no offers were made that day. I sure hope that I find a property soon and none of these things happen to me. And I sure hope that if you're selling or buying, that it all goes smoothly. Until next week, goodbye.